I'm going to try to do this mic, but I've heard that it's been cutting out anytime somebody tries to use it, so I might have to go to this guy, but we'll see how that goes. So, anyway, how are you guys? Doing well? Everybody braved the rain from earlier? It's awesome to see. We still have a really good turnout, right? It's awesome. So I wasn't here last week, so I'm going to need a little bit of help from you guys in the beginning tonight to kind of catch me up to speed, fill me in on what we talked about last week. I wasn't here, but just the passage itself is one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture, so I'm really jealous that Stephen got to preach it and not me, but it's okay. So you guys fill me in. What happened last week? Who were like the two people that were really in need of Jesus' help in the story? Who was the first one? I can wait.
I said the Pharisee.
The Pharisee? Okay, there might have been Pharisees in need too, but there was a guy whose name started with J, who had a really big issue going on with Jairus. Okay, Jairus, I don't know. Okay, so that might be why I just say anything because we don't know how to pronounce his name. I don't know if it's Jairus, whatever. Okay, so him, he was in great need because his daughter was really sick, right? And then who else was in need of Jesus' help in that story? Yeah. Yeah, she'd been sick, so she had had a discharge of blood for how many years was it? I remember? I think it was 12. Yeah, it was like 12 years. And so I don't know how much Stephen dove into the topics and details of all of that, but what that meant was that based on Jewish kind of ceremonial laws, she would have been deemed unclean. And so what that means was that for 12 years, she would not have known the physical touch of another person for 12 years. She would not have been able to go to the temple to worship God for 12 years. Because she was ceremonially unclean, and if anybody else would have touched her, they would have become unclean. And so this woman just lived this life as an outcast. And so her boldness is awesome, right? As she reaches out and touches Jesus, this guy who's been healing people and been doing all these works, and she's like bold enough to go and touch him and risk making him unclean, because of how much she needs healing and how much she believes that he can heal her if she just touches his garments. And so that's what happens in the story. And so it's one of my favorite stories in all Scripture because there's this really, really cool moment where Jesus is walking along the road and he just healed the woman and kind of commended her for her faith. And then he keeps walking with Jairus, and these guys come down and they tell Jairus the really bad news that his daughter had died. They say, hey, don't trouble the teacher any longer. It's no use. She's dead. And like imagine the pain and like the feeling that you would get in your gut in that moment. I don't know if you guys have ever had like a friend or family member who's been really sick and you've been praying and like asking that God would heal them. And then you come to a place where you realize that they're not going to be healed. Or they haven't been healed and they passed away. Like that feeling of like gut-wrenching pain in the bottom of your stomach. You can just see Jesus in that moment. I imagine Jesus probably put his arm around him because what he said to him is, do not fear, only believe. So Jesus pretty much tells him in that moment, like in his biggest time of need, it's going to be okay. Let's go to the house, and he ends up healing her. And I think Stephen did something that he wasn't able to get into all that, so he goes to the house and ends up healing her, and she's alive. And so anyway, that's story. So tonight, we're in the next chapter of Mark. So Mark chapter 6, if you guys have your Bibles, go ahead and open them up there. We're going to be in Mark chapter 6, starting in verse 30. And I hope that you guys have been following along with the reading plan, because what we're doing in Mark is we're breaking down these 7 different stories in the book of Mark that highlight who Jesus is and how we can understand more of his character and who he is and his identity by these stories. But these 7 stories aren't just isolated stories that we talk about on a Sunday night and then we have a great time when we go home. These 7 stories are 7 key stories that are all happening in one big narrative, in one big collective story that Mark is telling, and is really explaining some really big truths about who Jesus is. And we see it all along that the disciples just keep missing it, and we're going to see tonight that they see a miracle happen, but they still miss it, and they still don't understand who he is and what this story is supposed to tell them about who he is. And so all this is happening in the context of a bigger story about who Jesus is. So I really hope that you guys are following along with that reading plan, because it's going to help you understand what just happened and what's about to happen in the context of the stories. So I need one really brave and bold person to come up and read Mark 6:30 through 44 all the way through. So JD or Christopher, when y'all can Y'all have this handheld muted, ready to go. So, need one person to come up and read it. I have my Bible here, so you don't even have to read your Bible. You can just use mine if you want. Garrett, come on. Come on up.
Sir.
I'll give Garrett a hand. All right. Mark 6, and you go 30 all the way through 44. Yeah, you want that up to the pages.
The apostles returned to Jesus and told him that all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like a sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s. And by taking 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took about 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men.
Awesome. Thanks, Garrett. I'll give Garrett a round of applause. All right. So probably a story that you guys have heard before, right? Jesus feeds 5,000. It's a really common story. So there's a story of him feeding 4,000 people, and then there's this one of him feeding 5,000, which is actually a lot more than 5,000. What we'll find out later, there's a key word there at the end of the story that tells us that it's not just 5,000 people, it's 5,000 men, meaning there are women and children there too, most likely. So anyway, a ton of people. And so, in the beginning, in verse 30, it says that the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And so context, right? So just a few verses before this, we see that what just happened is Jesus had sent these men out to preach. And I think in verses 12 and 13, Mark 6, 12 and 13, it says, "So they went out and proclaimed that people should repent. And they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them." And so what happened is Jesus pretty much gave his apostles the power that he's been exercising recently. We've already seen in previous weeks that he's healed people who were sick with diseases and he's cast out demons. And so he gives his apostles this same exact power to go out and do that. And they come back and they're reporting to Jesus everything that they've done. And they're telling him about it. And his response is like, "Awesome. All right, now let's go over to the other side of the sea and let's get some rest. We need to take some time off, right? Because you guys have just been out traveling from town to town, city to city. You've been preaching the gospel, healing people, all these different things, right? So you're tired." And so the way that I kind of imagine the scene happening as Mark explains it here in these verses is like, imagine working really, really hard one week, and then you have like a getaway weekend planned with your best friends. And so, guys, since we decided to separate guys and girls tonight, not we as in us, but we as in you guys, I guess, decided to separate guys and girls tonight. So if I need to speak to the guys, maybe I'll just go this way, for the girls, maybe I'll go that way. But anyway, so, I don't know, it's just funny. Yeah, there's a few girls right here. Yeah, I see it. So, exceptions, right? So what's happening is like you're like with your guys or like the girls that you were closest with. Okay, so anyway, well, there's 2 more guys in the back here. They're the rest of the guys, so they can do what they want. But anyway, I need to get back to the story here. Imagine you like with your best friends, or with like if you're the ladies, if you're like with your best ladies, and so it's like your closest friends. And you're going, and you're exhausted from the week that you've just had. You've just been out doing all this work, and you got a getaway weekend planned. And so like, I literally imagine Jesus and the apostles, like they're best friends. They've been going around for probably weeks or months now, doing ministry. And now they're exhausted. So Jesus says, "Okay, let's get away to the other side of the sea and relax for a little bit." And so there's 4 at least 4 professional fishermen on board, right? Like we learned earlier that James, John, Simon, and Andrew are all like fishermen by trade. And so I imagine like they're going across the shore and it's like, no problem, man, we'll catch some fish on the way. We'll pull up to the beach, set a little fire up, cook the fish. We'll have a good meal together. We'll hang out, catch up on life, talk about ministry, like rejoice in what the Lord's been doing. And this is literally what they're planning to do as they go across the water. But then when they get to the edge of the water and they pull up to the beach, people notice who's in the boat, and they know what they've been able to do recently. And so people beat them to the shore before they pull up to it. And so when they get there, there is literally thousands of people on the beach and on the countryside right there in front of them. And so imagine, you've been working for weeks, you're exhausted, you're tired, you finally have like this time where you're with your best friends, you can let all your walls down, you can just relax and hang out and take a breather, right? And then there's thousands of people there. So what is the response of the disciples, and what is the response of Jesus when they see this huge crowd? Look at verse 34. It says, when he went ashore, meaning Jesus, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. So I'm going to highlight 3 different things tonight, 3 different key aspects and characteristics of Jesus' character that we see in this passage. And the first one we notice in verse 34, Jesus cares. Jesus cares. He pulls up to the beach. Him and his best friends are exhausted. They are trying to get away from people. And they pull up to the beach and there are thousands of people in front of them. And rather than being frustrated that they don't get their time alone that they wanted, rather than being frustrated that all these people just won't leave them alone, Jesus has compassion for them. And he looks at them and he realizes that they're like sheep without a shepherd. I don't know how much you guys know about sheep, but they're not the brightest creatures. And if they don't have someone to guide them and a shepherd to lead them, then they'll end up falling off a cliff. Like literally, they will be wandering out into a land, like in a field, eating food. And if there's a cliff, if the shepherd doesn't keep them away from that cliff, they will walk off the cliff because they just don't know what they're doing. So anyway, he looks at them and he's like, man, they're like sheep without a shepherd. They need someone to teach them, to guide them, and to lead them. So he cares for them. And the thing is that he doesn't just have compassion on these people here. Like Jesus, this is something that's true about his nature, about who he is as a person, and ultimately who he is as God. He cares. And so some of you guys tonight, I need to hear that. I need to hear the fact that Jesus, like the God that you worship, cares about you. He cares about the things in your lives. I don't know where all of you guys are in life. I don't know where all of your hearts are and what you're going through. But maybe you've made mistakes in your life and you've tarnished a good reputation that you used to have. And you feel that weight and you feel guilty for things that you've done in the past. And maybe people don't look at you the same way that they used to. Jesus still cares for you. Or maybe you feel like you miss out on a lot of things in life because you're trying to pursue the Lord and live a holy life and not fall into some of the temptations that your friends do. And you feel left down with a lot of things. You're not alone in that. Jesus cares about that and he cares for you. Maybe there's tension or there's discord at home. Maybe it seems like people are always arguing in your house. Or maybe like your parents don't understand you and there's always like tension and discord at home. Jesus cares about these things and he knows that they happen. And we notice here that he has compassion on us. Exodus 3, 7 through 9 really points this out. The verses should be on the screen. It says this, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. God in these verses is saying to Moses, and he still says the same for us today, that when my people are in trouble, I see their affliction. I see the pain that they go through. I hear their cries of desperation, their cries of help. He's not a distant God that's removed from us. He cares for us, and he knows our pain. And so that should lead us to go to him, to go to him when we feel pain, when we feel affliction, when we feel sorrow. We run to him because we know that he cares for us. But he doesn't just hear us and see us and feel bad for us. His compassion leads him to action, which brings us to our second point. So our second point, if you're taking notes, is that Jesus provides. Jesus provides. So where do we see this in this story? And then how does it ring true in our lives still today? When Jesus gets to the land, he has compassion for them. And then he's teaching them, and then what the disciples do is they come up and say, hey, Jesus, it's getting really late. We need to send these people home so they can go eat. Right? They're saying, like, it's getting late, and we're out in a desolate place. They need to get back to the city so that they can buy food and eat something. There's no food out here. And so Jesus looks at them and he says, well, you give them something to eat. And they say, you want us to go into town and get 200 denarii worth of food? Which, just so you guys know, a denarii is about a day's wage. Okay, so minimum wage in the state of Georgia is somewhere around $8. So a day's work of $8 an hour is $64 a day, about 60 bucks-ish, right? I went ahead and did the math. If you do that, 200 times that, it's about $12,000, $13,000 worth. So what they're pretty much saying is, like, you want us to go buy $12,000 worth of food and bring it back to the people? Like, this is crazy. There's thousands of people here. And Jesus looks at him and he says, well, what do we have? And they say, we have 5 loaves of bread and these 2 fish. And so then Jesus says a blessing over the food. And we don't know exactly what happens. We don't know if he multiplied the food or if he just made like a tiny portion of food enough for them to be satisfied. We don't know all the details. But we know that with those 5 loaves of bread and those 2 fish, 5,000 men, along with plenty more women and children, were fed and walked away satisfied. So we see that Jesus provides. We're going to see later, we're not going to jump into it tonight, but I hope you guys are following along with the reading plan. And what you'll see in the next story, right after this happens, it says that they get back into the boat, and then they go out, and that's the story where Jesus walks on the water. And so Jesus is walking on the water, and they freak out because they think he's a ghost. And they get scared, and they don't know what's going on. And Jesus pretty much says, like, hey guys, don't worry, it's me. And he gets onto the boat with them, and what he says to them, and it says in verse 52, that they had not understood about the loaves. So what it's saying is that the disciples didn't actually understand the impact and the truth of what happened in this story. And what it means is that what they didn't understand is that as long as the presence of Jesus, as long as the presence of Jesus is there with them, they didn't have anything to be afraid of. They were freaking out and they were scared when they were on the boat and when they saw Jesus coming to them from the water. When it says in verse 52 that they didn't understand about the loaves, what it means is that they didn't understand that as long as Jesus was there, there was going to be a way for provision to happen and that they were going to be okay, that they were ultimately going to be taken care of. Is the same truth reigns true in our lives today. The presence of Jesus should bring about a comfort that God will provide for us and that he will meet our needs. And so we see this in all kinds of other places in Scripture, but the crazy thing about God's provision in life is that we can't always see it happening when it's happening. Most of the time, the way that God provides for us in life, sorry, I don't know if this thing's annoying y'all, but it's annoying me. I'm going to go to the handheld. So, sorry guys. I'm going to have to go back to this guy. So what I was saying about Jesus' provision and God's provision in our lives is that we don't always get to see how he provides for us while it's happening. Provision, the way that God provides for you, a lot of times you can't see until you're past it and get to look back on it. I actually think that a really cool aspect of heaven is going to be that we're going to be able to see our life in its entirety and see that the providential hand of God working and moving throughout our lives along the way that we didn't get to see while we were in it. And so if you're in a place right now where you're depending on God for something, or if you're trusting something, or if you're in need of something in life that you're praying about, you guys need to know that God's provision isn't always obvious in the moment. And so what we do is we trust that he's working even when we can't see it. That's why we sing about it, right? It's a song that we sing all the time. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Jesus is always working on our behalf and providing for ways that we don't always recognize or see. So we see that, number 1, Jesus cares. Number 2, Jesus provides. And the third thing that we see in the story is that Jesus satisfies. Jesus satisfies. When we get to the end of the story, in verse 42, it says, and they all ate and were satisfied. 5,000 men plus women and children. thousands and thousands of people with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish ate and walked away completely satisfied. Unlike the things that the world tells us will satisfy us, Jesus actually does satisfy us and leave us feeling filled and fulfilled all the time. One of my favorite movies is a movie called The Greatest Showman. And so, does anybody else like The Greatest Showman? Anybody care about it? Okay, yeah, a lot of people. Good. Awesome. So, The Greatest Showman, I know every word to the soundtrack. It's one of my favorite soundtracks. I listen to it all the time, and I love it, and I sing along to it in the car, and it's great. Okay? One of the songs on that soundtrack, one of the songs in that movie, is called Never Enough. And this whole song is about how the more in life you get, the more you realize that it's not enough. You always need more. And so some of the lyrics of the song say this: all the shine of 1,000 spots, I'm not going to sing it, all the shine, my career from speaking with a microphone would be ended in an instant. Anyway, that's actually a legitimate fear. Like, you're wearing one of these. It's like, they have the power back there to completely ruin me at any moment by turning it on. But anyway, so they're kind and gracious and don't. But what the song says is, all the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky will never be enough, never be enough. Towers of gold are still too little. These hands could hold the world, but it'll never be enough. It'll never be enough. And the main character in this movie actually has to go through a whole lot of crap in life to realize that the things that he's chasing for in life are never enough. And he returns back home to what is enough and what does satisfy. You can get everything that your flesh wants in life, guys. You can get everything that your flesh wants. You can get everything that the world tells you that you need in order to live a happy, prosperous, and fulfilling life. But without Jesus, it's still going to leave you unsatisfied. You're always going to have to find more. You're always going to have to chase the next high. You're always going to have to chase the next thrill, the next excitement. Because ultimately, it satisfies for a moment, but it leaves you empty. And Jesus is the complete opposite of that. In John chapter 4, he has an interaction with this woman in Samaria, this woman at a well. You guys probably know the story. He comes and he interacts with this woman, and he's sitting down at the well, and she comes up and he asks her for a drink. And she's kind of taken aback because he's a Jewish man and she's a Samaritan woman. And Jewish men didn't exactly look at Samaritan women as somebody worthy to talk to. And so she's taken back the fact that he's even talking to her. She's like, are you really talking to me right now? And he says, if you knew who was talking to you when I asked you, then he would have given you living water. And she looks at him and she's like, there's a well right here. You don't even have a bucket to bring the water up it. What are you talking about? And he explains to her that it is a spiritual water, that it is a living water. And what he says is that anyone who drinks of this water will not have to come back here and drink and over and over and over again. He says someone who gets this water, that will become in them a spring of living water that is flowing to everlasting life. He's telling them that you won't have to keep coming back to things for satisfaction. You will be satisfied with what I give you. St. Augustine, who was probably after everybody who lived in the Bible, so like the end of the first century on, is probably the most influential writer, the most influential person in the history of the church at large. And in one of his books, Augustine wrote this. He said, you have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. You have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. So know tonight that if your heart is feeling restless and you're just feeling like you're not being satisfied by the things of the world, maybe you're believing the lies that Satan tries to tell us, that if we have things that go against the Lord, we'll be satisfied. And maybe you believe those things and you're realizing that they don't satisfy and you always need more, and your heart is tired of searching. Please know that you can find satisfaction, whether it's tonight for the first time or whether you're a believer that's been walking with Jesus but is strayed away from him. You can find satisfaction tonight and always in the presence of Jesus. And so we're going to dismiss after we sing another song, and you guys are going to talk in your groups about what it means that Jesus cares for us, that he provides for us, and that he satisfies us, and really how that plays out in our lives and the implications that has. So I'm going to pray for us, and the band's going to come up, and we're going to sing one more song of worship, and you guys will be dismissed to your groups. Jesus, thank you for your word. Thank you for this Gospel of Mark that we get to learn about together this summer. And God, thank you that it tells us things that are true about you. Thank you that we get to learn about you and who you are. And Jesus, the book of Hebrews says that you are the same today, yesterday, and forever. And so what we learned about in the book of Mark, it happened 2 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. But God, it is still true today, yesterday, and forever. And so, Jesus, we cling to that. Would you lead us into truth as we discuss these things in our groups? Lord, we love you and praise things in Jesus' name. Life group leaders,